Hi everyone, this is Sharon. Today I am working on a design team project for Christy at Everlasting Journals. And this project is going to be a tutorial on how to transfer images from paper to fabric. I did that a couple of weeks ago and I had a number of requests from people to do a tutorial, so that's what we're going to work on today. The images I'm using for this project are from Christy's kits 43 and 44. So I pulled these images from her 43. It's a kit with a lot of kind of Victorian style images. And then this kit 44 has lots of really pretty like wallpaper or fabric patterns in them. So the first step I'm going to do is to loosely cut these out. And they don't have to be exact because after I have my transfers onto the fabric, we can do some more precise cutting when we work on our little project. So I'll cut that one out, and then there's this one. I'm just going to cut around that frame a little bit farther. We're going to be rubbing the paper off the fabric, so the white parts really aren't going to show. All right, let me get those all out of the way. I'll cut these two out also. Okay, I have all of my images cut out, and I also tore some smaller pieces of fabric to use for my transfers. So I am using for this project just kind of a lightweight muslin fabric. This is a cotton fabric. It's inexpensive. You can buy it at most fabric or craft stores. I think for this project, a fairly tight weave is good. I think just about any kind of plain cotton fabric would work. Even like a white sheet would be perfect for this project. I think if you get a weave that's either too nubby or thick, like a linen, or something that's too meshy, like a cheesecloth or something, you won't get as clear of an image transfer. But I think they would be fun to kind of play around with, because you might get something that's not as clear, but it might give you a more of a vintagey kind of worn look to it. So by all means, try them out. Now I cut mine, or just tore these down into smaller pieces just for ease of use. So, I'll have a couple of smaller pieces for those, and then I've got a little bit larger pieces for this one and this one. So I'll start out with these smaller ones first. I'm just going to grab a piece of white cardboard here so I don't get my surface dirty. Okay, it's a very simple technique. I am using this matte gel medium from Liquitex. There are a number of different brands that you can use, but a matte gel medium is what I'm using for this particular technique. And I'm just using a paintbrush to apply it. So what we're going to be doing is brushing the gel medium onto the paper. And I like to put a fairly thick coat on there. And then I kind of just go in both directions. Make sure it's well coated. Okay. And then I'm going to get that out of the way, my fabric piece, and then I'm just going to take this coated piece, flip it over, and press it onto the fabric. I'm going to bring this back over here, because what I want to do is take my brayer and just kind of lightly bray that onto the fabric to make sure there's good adhesion in all corners. Whoops. There. One thing I want to mention is that these are Laserjet images. I printed them on a Laserjet printer, and I think Inkjet would probably get blurry and run with this technique. Now, after this technique, I'm going to try 2 other techniques using Inkjet images, because I know a lot of people use Inkjet as opposed to the Laserjet. So we'll see how those techniques come out. I haven't tried either one of those yet. So now I am going to let this sit. You want to make sure your matte medium is completely dry before you go to the next step. So I usually let it dry overnight, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to let this sit here overnight. I will also coat my other pieces, and then we will come back tomorrow and do our next step. Okay, I am back and it is the next day. I've got a couple of my pieces here and they're completely dry. So our next step will be to wet these and peel that back paper layer off the fabric. Now I usually do this, I'm going to back this up a little bit. I usually do this near my sink, but we'll do it here under the camera and hopefully we won't make too much of a mess. So there are 2 methods that I usually use to do this part. We'll try both of them and you can see which one works best for you. Most times I'll just douse them into a little bit of water like I have here in this container and then just scrape off the paper in there. The other method that I use is to just spray the back of the paper with some water and then peel it off that way. I think if you douse it, the paper does tend to come off a little bit easier. But with the spray bottle, you can just keep spritzing it until you get what you need. Okay, so I'm going to let this soak in here for just a few minutes. I've had this soaking for about maybe 3 minutes or so. And I usually start testing it by just rubbing the back of the paper a little bit to see if it starts peeling off, and it looks like it is. So I'm just going to keep going with that. And I usually keep it submerged so this bucket catches all of the little paper bits. That way I can easily throw them out. So I just keep rubbing until I see that image come through. We're working on the shoe, so we should see the shoe appear. And I try to get most of it off in this container of water first, and then I'll pull it out and just finish it up a little bit once I've got most of the paper pieces removed. Okay, I think I've got most of the paper off, so let's pull it out so you can really see what I'm doing here. So you can see there's our image that has transferred over onto the fabric. And we're basically just trying to get that layer of paper off the top. And if you rub too long in one spot, you could rub some of that ink off the fabric. So you kind of have to be careful. I don't mind if I get some off here and there. Like I said, I like a vintage look, so if it looks worn to me, that's fine. I think that's pretty good right there. I will go rinse this off under my faucet to get all the little paper bits off that are remaining, and then we will set that aside to dry. Okay, here is the other image I have on my fabric, and for this one we're going to try the spray bottle method. It's a little bit messier on your work surface because you'll have all the paper scraps on there, but you don't have as much water to deal with. Now this is peeling off almost immediately. I'll let it soak a little bit. It's always fun. I love this part, the reveal, when you see that little image under there emerge. These are some framed pictures. Really pretty, sort of Victorian looking ones. Okay, I'm going to scrape these to the side. You can roll off some big chunks once in a while if you just kind of keep rolling. Okay, I'm going to just spritz a little bit again, just to kind of get those last bits of paper up. Okay, there is our image. I'm going to go rinse this one as well. And then I'm going to let these dry for a bit, and then we'll come back and we are going to make some Christmas ornaments. Our second technique is designed to be used with inkjet printouts. Now, I've had mixed success with this technique. I saw it recently on a House of Books on Instagram, and I will link her Instagram channel down below. And so we are going to try this on camera and see how we go. I have printed out these two angel images from Christy's kit number 43. And I am going to attempt to transfer them onto these fabric pieces. So for this technique, it still involves the gel medium. And I'm using a brush again. But the technique I saw, she brushed on the gel medium onto the fabric rather than the paper. And then she put the paper down and burnished that. Now, the first time was a complete flop for me. The second time, not too bad. And I really don't know why. I think it has to do with the fact that you really have to burnish that image down really well to the fabric before peeling it up. And so we will try that and see what happens. I couldn't tell, I wasn't sure how long to leave it on here. You pull it up while it's still somewhat wet. But I couldn't really tell from her video how long she waited, if she even waited at all. It looked to me like she did it immediately. But we will see. So I just put a layer onto the fabric. I'm going to take this inkjet image, put it down, and she burnished with her fingers, so that's what I'm going to do first. And then she took a scraper and burnished it down. I don't have that, but she said a credit card would work also, so I will try that. Well, I got an incoming call that apparently kicked me out of my video. So this was the one I was working on camera a little bit ago, and I continued to remove the paper on that, and this is what it looked like when I was done. So, you know, it's got a little bit of some of the spots removed, but for the most part, I would say it's pretty successful. So let us attempt one more on camera, since you didn't see how I removed the paper. I'm going to load this one up again with some of the medium. And I don't think it matters what direction you apply it. And on the little short tutorial I saw, she didn't put a real thick layer, not as thick as the layer I did on the lasers. Just, I think so it's coated enough. Okay, I think that's good. Now I will put this down like this, and we will start burnishing with our finger. And I'm trying to remember what I was telling you as I was removing the paper on the other one. Burnishing is important. I think that seems to be the key. And the other thing is, I burnished until I started to rub off this top layer of paper. Because it is a dry method. You don't remove it with water like you do the Laserjet method. And on the demo I saw, she just lifted the paper up, I think when it was somewhat wet, maybe a little tacky, drying a little bit. But I found that if I lift the paper, the ink doesn't stay down as well as if I just start rubbing off that top layer of paper on this back side. So that's kind of what I did on the one that I just finished. I may speed this up a little bit on camera, but you can kind of see what I'm doing with my finger. Now, like I said, she had a burnishing tool. I don't know, I just kind of like using my finger. But I think a credit card probably would work pretty well. And I also think just letting that medium dry a little bit is helpful. just so it's not so smushy and gushy and it's a little more on the tacky side. Okay, I'm going to let that sit there for just a minute. As you can kind of see the image come through the back side here, just start taking your finger and rubbing that layer of paper off. I think you can see now in some spots where it's a little wet yet. I think I'm going to give it a minute. I'm going to let it sit and come back, and then I'll tell you how long I waited. Okay, I have had this sitting here for, I would say, maybe about 5 minutes, and I think it's time to start rubbing off this paper and see what we get. And I think that is kind of a good trick, is to let it dry a little bit. I was under the impression that it was still quite wet, but it seems to me letting this dry a bit is much more successful. Now this is sticking a bit to my paper, so I think something like wax paper would work so much better than this piece of cardboard I had. Okay, so now I'm just going to keep rubbing that paper off with my finger, and it will reveal our nice image. I think this is a pretty good technique for inkjet images. Here was a wet spot that I pulled off before it was tacky and dry, so that did pull up a bit. Get all my little extra pieces of paper off of there, but that is our transfer image. So I'm going to let that completely dry before we start working with our images to make our little projects. Okay, I am back for our third and final technique. This one is again designed for an inkjet printout. And so for this one, I am going to use this image from Christy's Kit 44. This is what it looks like printed on paper. So for this technique, to me, this one is the scariest one. I'm not sure why. I think it's because you will be printing onto this shiny, waxy paper. The ink will be wet, and you'll be basically putting that down onto your fabric. And you can't move it once you've got your paper down, or it'll get mottled. Now this technique, because you're working with the wet ink, it's again not going to be as clear as, say, the Laserjet transfer or some of the other methods. It's more of a faded kind of fabric look. So what I'm using this paper is just the backing. If you use these shipping labels, it's this backing shiny piece, and I think that's what, so this is a technique I saw from Jean at Inky Owl Studio. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. And I will link her video down below so you can check hers out. She does a really nice job of explaining some techniques as well. And she gets some really good results with this, so I'm really excited to try it. Anyway, she mentioned that you could also use freezer paper as an option if you don't have this kind of paper. So what I'm going to do is take this to my printer and print out that image, this one, and we will come back and see how this technique works. Okay, I am back with my printout on my paper, and here we go. One thing I wanted to mention, I think one of the secrets of success for this is to make sure that you've got a good border around the outside where you can handle this paper without getting your fingers inky, and to make sure that you've got plenty of fabric around your paper. So I'm just going to lay this down, make sure I don't move it. Again, this requires a little bit of burnishing. Now, Jean used a brayer, and I think I'll do that, but I'm going to hold onto the other half of the paper to make sure it doesn't move. I'm just going to go from the inside out, I think is maybe the best method. And then I'm going to do this side. And we're basically taking that wet ink that was on the surface of the paper on that waxy side and transferring it to our fabric. Okay, moment of truth. Okay, so I didn't have a real colorful image that I selected, but you can see the pattern on there. I think for the most part that's pretty successful. And like I said, it's a very faded look, like something you've washed 100 times in the washing machine. I am back with my inkjet images, and it is the next day and I let everything dry thoroughly. So these are what our angels look like. And then just as a reminder, we did this technique where we used the waxed paper printed on there and then burnished it onto the fabric. I'm not completely satisfied with this, and I really don't want to use this image in my project, so I'm going to set that aside for now. I am still going to link Jean's from Inky Owl Studio, Jean's tutorial, because hers came out really nice, and that's what got me excited to try this. So I need to do some tweaking yet and figure out how to get mine to look a little brighter. There are a lot of variables. It could be the fabric, it could be the printer, it could be the images I chose. I don't know, but I'm going to set that one aside. And just again, as a reminder, this is what it looks like on paper. This is that technique that I used. And then I decided to do 2 more backs with the same technique that I used for the angels. So with these 2, I put the gel medium on the fabric. I put my images face down, burnished it. I let it dry almost, you don't want to let it dry completely, but almost dry, like a tacky. I think that came out the best. And then I just pulled that paper off the back side, and this is what I got. Now it's really interesting with the inkjet images. They are not very close to what you would see on paper as far as color goes. So that's something to keep in mind with the inkjet ones. You're going to get lots of different variety, and it looks, where I really rubbed well, it's kind of a pinky coral color as opposed to the brown. And then there's some brown in here, but it's got a greenish tint to it. So it's really a surprise as to what you're going to get. I don't mind these colors. I think they look really nice with the angel images. So I'm going to use these in our project for today. And I will come back with all of my transfers, and we are going to make some ornaments. I am back with 5 ornaments in front of me. 3 are completed, I did off camera, and the other 2 we will work on together. So all of these ornaments are made with the transfer fabric that we did earlier in the video. I'll just kind of show you the ones that I completed so far. So here is our shoe. I love this old shoe. And what I did was I sandwiched it with some batting. So I put, this is something you would use to make a quilt or something like that. So I have a layer of the batting in the center. I've got this image on top that I cut out. Took the excess fabric off around the outside of it that we had. And then this is one of the other images that I transferred. And I think these colors and patterns really came out quite vibrant and crisp for fabric anyway. So here I rubbed a little bit too hard on the paper, and it's got this weathered, aged look to it, so I don't mind that at all. It kind of goes with the theme. Now, one thing I want to mention about this fabric, once it's all dry, it feels and looks and even sounds exactly like canvas. It's quite stiff. It's got a lot of structure to it. So just an FYI. Okay, so that's our first one. I added a little bit of bling there, and then I did this blanket stitch, loose one around the outside, and hung it with a ribbon. And I also did some machine stitching right around here. Okay, then this one, I again did a little bit of machine stitching around the oval. I did a hand stitch, whip stitch around the outside. I punched a couple of holes and then just threaded this seam binding ribbon in there. And then I just took a bulb pin and added a couple of buttons. And this is the back. It's got that pretty damask patterned paper, but now fabric. And then this one is the angel image. And I stitched again around the outside, and all 3 of these that I made have the batting in the middle, sandwiched between the front and back. So here I used my pinking shears and pinked around the outside. I stitched in this velvet green ribbon and added this little jewel at the bottom, or crystal. And then this is our pattern that we had for the back. So I am going to set those aside. I am going to make an angel one exactly like this one, pretty much. I've added a little bit of glitter on there. We'll do that too. And then I will also make this one, and that will be made similar to this one. So let's do our angel first. I already cut a little piece of batting to use in the middle. And then I've got this back piece. It's larger than I need, so I'm just going to put these together and kind of make them all approximately the same size, and maybe get this situated where I'd like it as far as the pattern goes. And then what I'm going to do to kind of hold these together while I stitch this is just use a little bit of Fabri-Tac. You can use any kind of fabric glue just to kind of adhere those layers together. Now, you don't need a whole lot, I don't think. It's just mainly to keep it in place while you're stitching. So I'm just going to stick a little bit in the middle. I'm not going to go out to the edge because I really don't want to stitch through that Fabri-Tac glue. And then I'll also put some on this back layer. And then I'll just take my scissors and cut this closer. After a while, I'll use my pinking shears, but for now, that's good enough to do the machine stitching. So now I will take this to my machine and stitch around the outside. Oh, the other thing I need to do is to grab my velvet ribbon, and I am just going to insert that in the top so that it gets stitched in when I do my machine stitching. Okay, I have my ornament stitched around this outside. I just followed the scallop. Now the stitching is not necessary. You could glue the whole thing together. You could hand stitch around the outside. That would be another nice option. Whatever you feel like doing. I like the batting in the middle because it just gives a little squish and a little bit of a three-dimensional feel. So next I am going to take my pinking shears and I'm just going to follow that scallop around the outside and just give it a nice edge. Be careful not to cut your ribbon. So I'm just going to kind of move that out of the way. And that is secure in there because I stitched it in with my machine. Okay, so we have our scallop edge done. I think that looks nice. That's what our back looks like. Okay, next step on this one, the only thing we have left to do, well, two things. Glitter. So let me get a sheet of paper. Stick that under here. And on this one, I just did a little bit on the headband and on the wings. So I'm going to do something similar on this one. I think this little headband here. And let's see, what else do we want to do? I'm going to do a little bit on the wings. There's not a whole lot there. And then I think I'm just going to come around the outside of this scallop in a couple of spots. Maybe more than a couple. I use a combination of gold and silver. I like to mix the two together, and that just gives it a really nice kind of tarnished gold look. And I'm going to scoop this from my container onto here, and hopefully that won't make too much of a mess. Now it does stick quite a bit to the fabric, so I'll brush that off. Oh, I'm going to make a mess no matter what. Okay, I'm going to let that sit on there for a little bit, and then we'll brush it off. Okay, now we will just do a little brushing to get all the excess off. I really made a mess of this one. I was much neater with the one off of camera. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more glitter on these wings here to define those a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of go there and then up here. And then we'll cover those up. Okay, I think that's good for glitter on this one. I'm sure there was a much neater way of doing that, but I am going to get this mess out of here and we'll finish that up. Okay, I say I have my glitter cleaned up, but I know I'll find remnants of it in here for the next 6 months. All right, so our last and final step now will be to add our little crystal at the bottom. So I'm going to take my, I think it's an eighth inch hole punch, and just punch maybe right about there. And then I've got this jump ring. I'm just going to add my little jewel to the bottom. And then just put that together. And we have our angel ornament finished. I like those, they're very pretty. Okay, then we will move on to this one. So for this example, I had a ribbon in the top, and for this one I thought I would use this gold ribbon to go with some of the golds in this image. And then I stitched with this blue thread around the outside. And for this one I thought this kind of pinky red color would pick up a little bit of the pinky red in the bird. So that's what I'm going to go with for this one. So our first step will be to sandwich all three of these again, similar to our angel one. So here's the background. It's this damask image, and I sized these down. So in Christy's kit, they're all full page images, and I just made it much smaller to fit the scale of my ornaments. So I'm just going to layer these up, and again I'm going to glue them down because I'm going to take this to my machine and stitch it around the outside, so I just want that stabilized a little bit. I'm going to cut this whole bit a little closer. They don't need to be quite so large. Trim this off, and this just be a little bit easier to work with. Okay, and then I'm going to turn that over. Oh, glitter everywhere. And glue this side. Again, I'm not going to get out to the edges because I don't want to stitch over that glue. Okay, I am going to take this to my sewing machine and just follow this oval just inside the frame all the way around the outside. Okay, I've got my machine stitching done, and now I'm just going to take my scissors and cut around my oval along the outside edge, and I'm going to do that before I do my hand stitching. Okay. And now I'm ready to do my hand stitching around the outside. So for this one, you can see it looks pretty thick around the outside, and I kind of like that look. I left all the strands, however many there are, I think 6 maybe, and use the entire width of that. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, I have to be honest, stitching through this canvas-like fabric is a little difficult. So I use this notepad at the bottom just to help me poke my needle through. So I'm just going to make a knot at the end. I can cut that string off later. And I'm just going to start at the bottom, I think. So I just come through and I push it down to my pad, my needle or the fabric, and then it's just a little bit easier getting this through. And I just basically do a simple whip stitch around the entire outside. So I will continue to do that all the way around, and you don't have to watch me do that part because I'll probably stick myself about 5 times. But when I have that done, I will come back. Okay, I have my stitching all done. I went all the way around. I like the way that color of thread looks against the frame. And I just knotted it on the bottom and cut that off. So our next step will be to add our ribbon at the top. So I've got this gold ribbon. And I'm going to take my hole punch and punch a couple of holes. See if I can get this by eyeballing. I'm not good at that. I'm going to put one here. And then one about there. I like hanging these this way because these pictures remind me of the old Victorian oval pictures hanging on the walls, and then they would hang them with string. So we are going to mimic that. So I'm just going to thread this ribbon through and tie a knot in the front. I think that should be good. And then run it through on this side. Let's see, I think we'll cut it off right about there. Not that. Okay, and then we're gonna cut those ends off. There. And then I did find a couple of buttons that I can hang on this one as well. I just strung them on this bulb pin. Let's see, do we want them on this side? I think on this side. Okay, and there is our cute little Victorian style ornament. So we've got that one. this one, our two angels, and of course our beautiful Victorian shoe. Thank you so much for sticking with me today. I really appreciate that. I had a lot of fun putting these together. I hope you make some ornaments too and really try your hand at image transfers. Let me know if you have any questions down below. Otherwise, until next time, bye-bye.